What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to another whiskey review. Today, we are going to review Fort Hamilton Single Barrel Bourbon. I just did a rye whiskey review of theirs, and now we're going to go into the bourbon. So, full transparency, I kind of alluded to this in my last video, but I got a chance to try the Single Barrel rye, and it was a store pick, but I got a chance to try it at a local liquor store, West Plain Wine and Spirits. Shout out to you. And I actually liked that bottle enough that I obviously bought it, and I liked it enough to reach out to Fort Hamilton and just kind of say I would love to do something, create some type of content for you guys, and just kind of explain Fort Hamilton a little bit better if I can. It was a brand that I wasn't as familiar with. I've seen their products on the shelf, but wasn't really too familiar. And I think, the more I understood what they were about, the more that I really started to root for them. And again, the experiences I had with their whiskey was also good. So in terms of full transparency, this bottle was actually sent to me by Fort Hamilton. So I appreciate you sending the bottle. But again, I am allowed to be as honest as I need to be in this review. There's nothing specific that needs to be said or anything like that. They just understood that I really liked the rye. They wanted me to try their bourbon single barrel as well. And that's it. And I think that's all it really needed to be. But I will shout them out because I am actually expecting my second child in any day now. So it's fine. We're not stressed out at all. But in the package that they sent, they knew that. And we knew that we were going to try to shoot these reviews and do all these things before that if possible. And with them knowing that, the package that they sent me actually included a handwritten note. So there's a lot of people that, you watch on YouTube or Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. And I'm sure many of these people that talk about whiskey have received bottles from different distilleries, whether it's to promote it or whether it's just to try it and give feedback or whatever it is. It happens all across social media. Free whiskey is always great. But what you don't find as much is what I found in my box from them, which was a handwritten letter just saying congratulations on the addition to your family. They actually included the maple syrup that was finished in the barrels as well. It's just a special thank you and for doing this. And then also, just a treat to the family, that sort of thing. And congratulations. The handwritten note meant more to me than they'll probably ever realize, but it also meant more in terms of me seeing who they are as a brand. I think that's something that's just lost. You don't really see that as much. For me personally, to receive whiskey is one thing. I've got handwritten letters, sure. But it's kind of generic. Happy holidays or cheers or, here's another bottle to review or to discuss or to try and provide feedback, whatever it may be. But to understand that, this is where I'm at in my life, that I've got my second child on the way, saying, hey, that's awesome that you're adding to your family. It just adds that personal touch to it and really makes it to where I want to help however I can, which is very little. But however I can help this brand, I want to. So I want to be transparent about that. Again, if I don't care for this whiskey, I will tell you that I don't care for this whiskey. But it just makes me, if I don't care for this whiskey, I want to be able to provide a reason as to why and give that feedback, because I want this brand to succeed, because they seem to be just genuine folks running it. So for those that may not know, I'll throw up the little B-roll, and here's where you read about the company and their story and all this stuff, right? But they're based out of Brooklyn, New York. I mentioned this in my last review of their rye whiskey. The one piece that I would love to know, and sometimes we can't know it, but it just says distilled in New York and bottled by them. So at that point, it makes me curious, is this a source product or not? Since they're based out of New York, it's really hard to tell. Sometimes when you look at the label and it says distilled in Indiana or distilled in Kentucky, you can obviously figure that out. The way that this is worded on the label, I'm not really sure. So that's the one piece of feedback that I would have for them. And again, that there might be some contracts in play where they can't give you more information. But for me as a consumer, that's something I really enjoy, that transparency and to understand where this product is coming from and what it is exactly that I'm drinking. Speaking of drinking, let's get into it. So this particular bottle is 95 proof. The single barrel rye that I tried was 122. So a lot different of a direction. This is a single barrel bourbon. The one I tried before is a single barrel rye, and it was a store pick. So I'm expecting this to be a whole different experience. With it being 95 proof, I'm assuming that this is going to be a little bit more approachable. But with it being a bourbon and not a rye, I'm wondering is that spice going to come through, or, you know, I'm curious what this mash bill even is and all that stuff, but we're going to ignore all that for right now. We're going to check out the bottle. So I absolutely love these labels. The single barrel bottles and labels are my favorite of theirs. For anybody keeping track, this is actually barrel 59, but I love the fact that they're based out of New York. They have all the history with Hamilton and the battles up there, and kind of just allude to that in the label. I don't feel like you're really trying to sell me on anything. That's just part of the history of their area, and they're just embracing that. That's the way I view it. I don't feel like it's a marketing ploy by any means. They're not saying this is the whiskey that Hamilton drank on his way to, you know, whatever battle. It's nothing like that. They're just kind of acknowledging the history. They can acknowledge the history. I'm going to acknowledge the whiskey. So let's take a look. So in the nose, to me, it's brown sugar, orange. It's like I hate when we differentiate between orange peel and orange zest and whatever. It's orange, but the brown sugar is definitely there. There's a little oak, but not nearly as much as what I got on the rye. I would say overall the nose at least seems to be a little bit more approachable. It doesn't seem to be as heavy with the ethanol. Has a lot to do with the fact that this is 95 proof, I'm sure. So yeah, but brown sugar to me is the main note here. I would say maybe a little bit of nutmeg, like some of those baking spices, cinnamon, we're kind of just hanging around there. I don't really get pulled in any other direction. Maybe like a little bit of a plum note? Question mark? Whatever. Let's taste the whiskey and see what we think. Cheers. So the palate to me is pretty unique. It's almost hard to pinpoint. It was brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, oak, kind of leaning in that direction on the nose. The palate then took me in a different direction. It was more citrus based, it felt like. I don't know if it's the proof, but the whiskey itself tasted a little thin. And again, it probably is the proof. Especially for the fact that in my other review, the 122 proof rye is what I'm familiar with from them. So to now have a 95 proof whiskey from them, it just by default tastes a little bit watered down, which it is. The whiskey itself tastes thin, but not the flavor, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, we're going with it anyway. So revisiting the nose, it's almost more floral. After I've had that initial sip, it just kind of opens it up to more floral notes, kind of going in that direction. The complexity for me is interesting because I kind of describe it as a roller coaster. Is the whiskey kind of just riding that wave, or is it going up and down? Is it one way on the nose and that's exactly how it is on the palate? Or does it change? For me, this is one that changes. The nose is, like I said, cinnamon, nutmeg, just in that area, baking spice, oak. The palate now it's taking me on a little bit of a ride, and now when I go back to the nose, it opens itself up to more floral notes. This is probably going to be a weird note. It reminds me of a barrel, but not just the barrel itself. It reminds me of when you go into a rick house and the barrel has the whiskey kind of leaking out of it, and you just kind of get that aroma as you're in a rick house. That's actually what this reminds me of on the revisiting the nose after I've had, look, forget it. Forget the palate and the nose all the time. I smelled it, I drank it, and when I went back to it to smell it again, that's what I pick up. There we go. We're on the same page now. Still citrus, but instead of orange, maybe it's kind of evolving into more of a lemon, like the way that a lemon can be refreshing when you add it to fish or something like that. I probably shouldn't say fish along with whiskey. This whiskey does not taste like fish. That's not what I'm saying. But the way that a lemon can kind of bring out some of those flavors and be more of a refreshing type of ingredient, that's what this reminds me of. There is some type of citrus or like a fresh lemon feel there, but it's made to enhance the whiskey instead of overpowering it as a lemon. I hope that all makes sense. The whiskey nerd in me would love to know this mash bill, because the direction that I'm going is, I wish there was a little bit more balance there. It seems like there could be, I would enjoy maybe a little bit more of a spice element, but with it being 95 proof, I think this whiskey kind of lends itself to being more approachable and maybe more widely enjoyable. The whiskey enthusiast in me wants high proof, wants huge, bold, big flavor, but that's not going to capture most people. Most people will be extremely turned off to whiskey if they were to have those things. Sometimes you need a whiskey to be a little bit lower of a proof and a wider, not a wider range of flavor, but you need it to be a very basic flavors to where this now captures a lot of people. This might be one that if I could just envision this as if you had a tasting room or distillery and people were to go visit it and you try maybe a flight of Fort Hamilton products, let's say. I bet this would be one that if somebody's not as familiar with whiskey or just kind of getting into whiskey and they try this, I bet they would leave the gift shop with this bottle over maybe some of their higher proof, just because that kind of, it's an easier sipping whiskey. It lends itself to being less aggressive. It's more approachable. I could easily see that being the case. Somebody like myself is going to go for that rye. And again, some people getting into bourbon don't necessarily care for ryes. I didn't when I first got into bourbon, but I feel like that's kind of the direction I would go for. A higher proof. I would go for those big punchy flavors and all that stuff. But somebody that maybe is going to a distillery for the first time, or maybe they've only tried whiskey a few times, or just kind of getting into it, I bet that they would enjoy the bourbon more than the rye. With all that being said, I rated the rye whiskey a 91 out of 100. I thought that was a fantastic bottle, and I mentioned it before. It was so good that it made me want to work with them and do something. This particular bottle, just because I would prefer the rye, doesn't make this a bad bottle. 90 out of 100 is what I would rate it. But again, I talk about, understanding where you're at in your bourbon journey, but then also understanding what that distillery is trying to accomplish. By coming down in proof to 95 instead of well over 100, I would assume you're making a product that's more approachable and you're being more intentional about reaching more people. Once you kind of get them there, now you can introduce them to higher proof products. I just myself enjoy a higher proof product. So I think I like the rye better than this, but that by no means makes this a bad whiskey. I would be curious if this holds up in a cocktail at that proof. I'm kind of, I myself don't like to use anything less than 100 if I can, unless it's maybe a rye whiskey that has the flavor enough to hold up. So I'd be curious about that. They actually sent me a little card for their old fashioned using their maple syrup, and walnut bitters. So I'll have to try that. So either way, I am a fan of this distillery. I'm a fan of what they're doing. I can't wait to see what else they continue to do. If you have Fort Hamilton in your area and you have distribution there, try it if you can. This is one that I would, if you can try it at a bar first, maybe do that. Price points in my area, I believe, were around the $50, $60 mark. But again, that was a single barrel. I don't know, how the pricing is around the country. But if you get a chance to try it before you buy it, I would definitely say that. But the fact that it's a smaller distillery and it may be one that you're not as familiar with, maybe it's one you just give them a shot. And again, for me, I love supporting companies that I know are genuine and that really care about their consumers. And, as easy as it would be just to send me a bottle and it is what it is, this is a company that took the time to just say congratulations, and what they're doing has excited me so far. I'm excited to see where they go from here. I really am. If you've been here this long, you know what I'm going to say. Like, subscribe, do all the things, comment. Tell me if you've had Fort Hamilton before. What are your thoughts? New York whiskey. Let's see where it goes from here. It's no longer all about Kentucky. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all the support, and I will see you in the next review. Cheers.